up, fam? It's Keen Dog. We're in Star Spangled Gambler's Quarantine HQ, and in case you can't tell, it's a little bit weird. Anyway, before this week's episode, I just want to put out a call to all the boys to get these things done. We got to pay WordPress for server space. We got to pay Libsyn for the podcast, Upwork for editing, MailChimp to manage all the communication between them. So if you can, if we're giving you tips that are making you money, if you're excited by this content, if you're having as much fun as we are making it, check out www.starspangledgamblers.com/support. That's our homepage /support. It's right there when you get there. And see if you can lend us your talents or a tip or throw us a few bucks to help this process keep going. We're going to keep churning out content. It's going to be great, and we want to do it with you. Anyway, let's check out this week's episode.
Welcome back to Star Spangled Gamblers. It's Keen Dog. I'm your host. If you've been listening to us for a while, you probably know what I'm going to say next. My ride or dies. Zoltar, where you at?
What it is, what it was, what it will be.
No boom booms?
Double or one?
No, double shot. Always a double shot.
Double it up. Oh! Some money, boys.
Pratik, you want to say hi?
I get creeped out no matter how many times I see the boom boom in hell.
Boom boom.
I get creeped out no matter how many times I see your soft and subtle introductions on this podcast. Today is, as of recording, this is our Monday podcast. It's June 6th, 2020. Happy D-Day, boys, or as I guess we're probably going to call in the future, Happy Anti-Fascism Day or something like that. Mm-hmm. Big day in history.
It's also a sad day on the day that the tweets died.
The day that the tweets died. That's right. It was a big week in history, big week in political gambling. The tweet markets are dead.
A lot of butt sharps out there.
The fields are burning.
Mm-hmm.
Pratik, you had a good point on this. I feel like the elite of political gambling is going to change a lot. You know, those leaderboards are so dominated. You know, they should be called the tweeter boards.
Yeah, I mean, now that I single-handedly killed the tweet markets, hopefully I'll send
the tweet killer.
Yeah.
Well, isn't it weird though that they didn't even announce it? They just kind of made it disappear.
Well, I don't know. You guys are lawyers. That sounds a lot like a legal settlement to me.
Well, they definitely got they got nervous because of the Trump Twitter, fact checking them became very political, and I think they didn't want to even get close to that controversy, so they just said, "You're out of there." But they also they killed Rasmussen same way. About 4 months ago, just all of a sudden it wasn't there.
I don't know. I don't play in those polling markets. They're all just people who it's like a cheater's game, and I don't know how to play it. So
it's like that scene in Rounders where you're playing poker against a table full of pros, and everyone's just killing you, making fun of how much they take your money. Tweet markets have always been the realm of the experienced pro, and I did not want to spend a year trying to catch up with the expertise and acumen that they've already developed. So I avoided that market like it was the plague.
Pratik, you had a big call this week. A couple big calls this week, actually. You want to do a little touchdown dance over there?
Yeah, I had a good week. One was the Steve King market, which we talked about before.
Not only did we talk about it, that was when we all held hands virtually. First time. I think there's some magic powers.
Distant celebration.
Yeah,
Pratik,
it was like
the
I'm in prison, put your hand on the window move. I think that's a streak we got going on.
All right, so Pratik, tell us your insight.
So what was interesting about that market is it remained a low volume market basically for the duration. Like I got into that market pretty early, and I thought that I was actually not anticipating necessarily remaining through the end, but it was actually pretty hard to flip shares in it. And even right up until election day, not many people were in it. Now, the other thing that turned out to be interesting about it is that there was never really reliable polling in that market right up until the end. And nothing really major happened, like a Trump endorsement or anything to provide an overwhelming clue. So it actually turned out to be ripe for doubling up your money, in large part, I think, due to predicted bias, where basically, even though all the fundamentals pointed to the fact that King was not going to be able to withstand the attacks and the money and the organization, there were a lot of people on PredictIt who basically believed that in the absence of any overwhelming polling evidence, that Republican voters would go with, the most vile racist candidate in the field. So it basically turned out to be an opportunity to double your money, basically at no cost.
I think people also just like fundamentally just like don't understand who has power and who has, access in Congress, because they see Steve King's name in the news so much because he says terrible shit. But like that guy was on all of the he was on no committees this Congress, but for the last 15 years, he'd been on all the committees where you hide the biggest morons that no one wants to work with, like small business, against judiciaries for ideologues. I'm trying to remember what else, but he was such a well-known loser. Like there are Republicans tap dancing on his grave right now. So again, love these markets. I'm glad that you found it. I wish I had bought more.
Great call. Great call, Pratik.
Yeah. I think the news cycle kind of had all of our attention somewhere else while this great money making opportunity was available.
There was actually at the last minute another opportunity to make a lot of money there in the margin market. And what ended up happening there is that, but even if you don't have like a granular knowledge there, the biggest and easiest money there was in the market on whether or not King would win by 6 points or more. It was pretty obvious, unless you had a real ideological opinion on this market, that if King won, he would like barely eke it out. And I think you could get into that. We'd have to check the price, but I think you could buy no just in that bracket alone at 80%.
So the lesson that I'm taking from this is, like everything in life, it's better to have smart friends than to be smart, because I followed you on this and it made my week. I don't want to dwell too much on this, but I think it was also, we'd been chirping on this podcast about Mike Pompeo not running for Senate, not leaving the cabinet. Those chickens came. That
was Pratik too, right? Wasn't that Pratik's call?
I think you were promoting that on our pretty recently. Roger Stone, you guys have been talking about. I don't really understand what's going on with that, but my predicted account's headed in the right direction.
Well, it looks like June 30th is when he's going to go to the pokey. Yeah. And me and Pratik are on the theory that Trump will not let that happen. So unless his prison date gets delayed again, he will get a pardon before June 30th.
Well, Trump this week said that he wouldn't allow Stone to go to jail, so it's going to happen. And so,
did he say that in a tweet or interview or?
I don't remember, but he said that don't worry, Stone's not going to jail.
Yeah, Trump has been pretty transparent about what his philosophy is with the pardons, and he said that he is going to let the process play out, which in the case of Flynn was a smart move, because it looks like he might actually, get exonerated / charges dismissed. Makes it look much better politically than if you just pardoned them. So Stone, he's not doing as well as Flynn. So I think he's going to drop that pardon, right before he checks in the prison.
In other news, Joe Biden clinched the nomination, which is a great day for my bank account. It's maybe a sad day for long-term earnings, because that means a lot of stupid people who were betting on Hillary just got blown out.
So that was for will he get the delegate majority, that market?
Yep. But he still has to live until the convention, so he can't get like Ebola or the Ronies or something like that. But I'm fairly confident that even a frailed adult diapers Joe Biden can make it a couple months to.
Yeah, well, the market still has him at 90 cents, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Boy, resounding confidence. Probably the same people betting on Steve King are the people shorting.
Also,
Joe
just
Biden.
Quick tip: if you're going to bet on
Bros.
If you're going to bet on Trump to win the presidency, bet on Republican winning the presidency. And if you're going to bet on Biden winning, then bet on Democrats winning the presidency, because those odds are much better.
It's a big news week. I think my workplace productivity was significantly lower than it usually is. A lot of unrest in the country. And one of the first places where this showed up unpredicted, for those of you who gamble and who like making money, is Secretary of Defense Mark Esper. What did he do? He is rumored to have told the president he'd resign if the military was used to put down demonstrations.
Say who he is for those less.
The Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper. Mm-hmm. So we've been getting some feedback from you in our mailbag. This is our Mailbag Monday podcast, and Josh chirps us saying, seems like given how Comey left, Trump has more of a tendency to fire someone when they're out of town. I don't really know what that means.
But I don't think you said what he did, though. Esper, he said that use of the military was like obnoxious, or what was the quote he gave?
He said it was bad. He just says it's not for me. I don't want to be in this business. I don't want to be in the business.
Did he say it publicly, or did he get quote unquote leaked?
It doesn't even matter anymore.
Well, I'm just curious. So anyway, he let it be known that I want out. I think Trump is abusing the military against U.S. citizens, and the question is, what's going to be the fallout of that?
I personally think, like, I hate trading. So we're now focused on the market of which cabinet member is going to leave next, and this one's been kind of a wild up and down roller coaster ride. I didn't time it right, so I'm not playing in it. But this seems like this market is such a sucker's bet for anyone buying and holding long. And my experience is that who's leaving the White House and when is just such a. I do not have a way to persuasively tell you who's going to predict, what's going to happen. So I don't usually. There's
a constant stream of news reports about Trump's inner circle and chaos, revolts, mutiny,
investigation.
They always, Trump's about to fire so and so, and 9 times out of 10, nothing ever happens because of it.
I think I'm playing this market quite differently from you guys, actually. So I have I tried to play the swings on Esper, and
that's very unlike you, Pratik.
Yeah, well, because I don't know. Should I get into the details?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, just don't put me to sleep.
This is a tree of trust. Let's go for it.
All right. Well, so I had actually 2 inside sources on this one telling me competing things. One guy was telling me his sources were primarily in the agencies, and he thought that right on the day of the press conference when Esper got called to the White House, that he thought there was a serious possibility that the firing could go down. But then within a few hours, his sources were telling him that the cabinet secretaries and others had convinced Trump to back off. But then other people, another source was telling me that people at the White House thought that a firing was imminent. Now, it turned out that even in the open press reports, we were getting similar competing stories, but it became clear to me from just the way people source and so forth that Esper was not going to get fired. I continue to think that Trump has basically decided to keep Esper at least through the elections. But I don't think the markets have really caught up to that insight. So I continue to think Esper remaining is a strong yes buy.
The thing that's ridiculous about this, though, is that, like, Key Dog's rules, I think I'm up to Key Dog's rule number 4. Inside sources never know what's going on. And they're always wrong. Like, I don't think I've ever, like, this seems much simpler. Like, if the Secretary of Defense resigns during this crisis, like, the Trump administration is illegitimate. Like, I don't know how they could continue to govern if the Secretary of Defense resigned in the middle of, like, a nationwide, like, lawless moment. Like, on what planet was that ever going to happen?
Well, so the reason it was a possibility was because people thought that Esper might resign in protest during the whole period when military leaders were coming out against Trump. But the other point here is that on the whether or not
they were wrong.
Yeah, but
I don't know. It's overreaction.
Yeah, and part of the reason there was a market panic is because journalists and others with purported inside sources were posting on Twitter that they thought Esper might be out. So, like, a discerning trader could have known that those were probably not reliable sources. But the point is that, I think now that the dust is settled on Esper, it's pretty clear that he doesn't want to resign, that he wants to keep his job. So I think he's going to be there through November. So I would say hold Esper yes through November. And I also think that...
Hold him no, you mean?
Oh, sorry.
He's at 75 cents right now. How high would you buy no shares at?
Well, I would wait I would wait until it gets into the high 80s.
Wow.
And then I also, because the thing is, like, Esper clearly wants to remain in the job. He doesn't have anywhere else to go. And I think he's just going to be there as long as he can. I also think there's a high cost.
But it's not,
if he wants to stay at the job, why would he release that statement?
It's not up to him is the problem, though. Is like I think it's very easy. Like, you have to time this so well, I feel like, because the odds of him resigning in the next couple of weeks to me are very low. But like, Trump is so arbitrary about how he makes these decisions that once the storm clears, I could still see him firing him as like, repudiation. So I don't want to be holding a 75%.
I think a lot of heads are going to roll after the election. If he wins, that's when he's going to.
Like, are you really going to hold that through November, or are you just going to take your gains?
No, I'm going to hold for. I don't know if I'm going to hold through November, but I'm going to hold once the markets basically realize he's not going anywhere. And the thing is, like, yeah, it's not completely up to Esper, but it's not completely up to Trump either. The reason why I was confident getting in during the panic is when both McConnell and Lindsey Graham weighed in, and also there were Democratic senators.
By the way, how hilarious was that McConnell tweet? Like, I'm so pleased with the advice and counsel that the president's, list cabinet secretaries threatening to resign have been giving. I hope he continues to listen to them. Like, it was just such a shot across the bow in a cryptic way.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the cabinet secretaries who Trump ultimately did fire, like Tillerson and others, they weren't exactly popular anyway. But with that kind of support from the Hill across the spectrum, Trump would have to spend a lot of political capital to get rid of Esper, and I don't think he's ready to do that right now.
I kind of think of like Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump's relationship as like maybe in that movie The Outsiders, like he's someone's big brother in like cooler jeans who just kind of beats up Trump and like tells him to pull up his pants and button his belt. Like, I don't know why. I feel like he's the one person that Donald Trump actually listens to from time to time, even though he doesn't really like him.
I'm actually taking a bit of a gamble in this market in another way. Also, I think I put in buy orders for Elaine Chao to be the next one out. And the logic there is basically that Trump doesn't want a cabinet shakeup, and most of these people probably aren't going to resign on principle. So I'm thinking that if McConnell looks like he's really in trouble with his election, maybe Elaine Chao decides to quit and go back to help him.
I don't think she's going anywhere. And if she's helping him with her money. But it's low priced, and it seems like there's so much volatility here that you might as well just buy some cheap yeses on people that no one are talking about and waiting for the rumors to swirl.
Yeah, I'm willing to buy them at 2 cents. I don't think I'd go any higher.
Yeah, I think that's a good buy. So speaking of lotto tickets, we've been getting we're always getting questions about the vice president race. Biden's VP nominee selection process seems to either be much simpler or much more complicated by the fact that most of our cities are in some degree of chaos right now, thanks to George Floyd protests. Don't read my tone on that at all. I'm just setting the stage here. Anyway, we've been hearing about Tammy Duckworth. She's the name that keeps getting left off as more and more attention goes to Black candidates like Keisha Lance Bottoms and Val Demmings as VP selection. So Dave L. asked us, I've got 2,000 long Duckworth shares at 4 cents. Should I lotto that or look to exit? Any word if she's on the vetting list? And I'm going to do a little sneak preview tease here. Armenian Bacon, who many of you know is, I think he goes as by Jack Burton on the the predictor boards. He's somewhere between a troll and a functional savant.
Unstable.
A little bit volatile. He's going to be doing a piece for us about this, claiming that he has inside sources, which, as you know, I discount heavily. He says African Americans care a lot less about the nominee being Black than being a POC. Again, this being an argument for
what's a POC?
Person of color. Anyway, that being a Tammy Duckworth argument. So how do you guys? I've got about 1,000 shares of Tammy Duckworth's at 5 cents right now. Do we feel like there's a bull run left in that candidate? I feel like she's very much still alive, and I want to hold mine.
I think it's anyone's race at this point. Any of them could be a VP. I think if you have a background as a prosecutor, like Kamala Harris and Klob, it's not going to look good based on these riots. But otherwise, I think anyone could get this VP nomination at this point. So I'm holding on to my Duckworth and I'm holding on to my Klob. I'm trying to get out of Klob, but I'm stuck at 4 cents. So at this point, I'm just going to hold it, hope for the best.
PJ, you got a position on Tammy Duckworth?
I'm maxed out no on her right now. I haven't seen a lot of evidence that she's really moving to the top. I might have to, if it does look like it, I might adjust my position. But I continue to think that with her disability and so forth, it's just going to be too hard to have her running a national campaign.
I don't want to hold anything. I'm trying to make clear that my strategy here is to be holding nothing when the actual selection comes, because I feel like at the end of the day, it's kind of arbitrary and personality driven, and everyone's got these wonky formulas for who's going to be the VP nominee. But I want to be holding nothing when the end of July comes around. I can't say that enough times. Do you guys think it matters? So I know Val Demmings is like very hot right now. I think she's second on the predicted list. Do you think it matters that basically like 2/3 of that show Cops was filmed in North Florida, where she was a police chief, and there's just like an endless tape of like alligator breeders and like, you know, people in gym shorts getting arrested by the police in Orlando?
It's like Reno 911 North Florida edition.
Yeah, but like real. Like, can you just do Oppo by just playing episodes of Cops and saying those were her cops?
Yeah, I'm sure the Oppo research is going to dig up a whole bunch of police brutality accusations, and God knows how the press is going to spin it.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a vulnerability.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you know, there lies the question. Like we've been sort of saying on this podcast that I feel like I respect Joe Biden and I respect Democratic voters more to think that the only thing driving their decision is the color of people's skin. But I've been wrong before.
So
or if
there's
they have a penis or a vagina.
One reader said that she's let me see who it is. Stephen Levy. He said that she's a fascinating potential pick for Biden, especially as she probably brings a 1 to 2 point swing in Florida. I'm not at all convinced that she actually changes the calculus in Florida. I mean, someone that controversial and polarizing, you know, yeah, she might drive some. I mean, in other words, who in Florida is going to show up to vote for Biden who wasn't going to anyway because of Val Demmings? But on the other hand, depending on the kind of Oppo research on her, there must be people in Florida who already know a lot of the dirt that the national media hasn't come up with. So I'm not convinced she'd be much of a factor in Florida either way.
You know, my boy Armenian Bacon, who I was just throwing shade on, said something interesting. He was talking about why Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms is a total fake news lark and is going nowhere on the VP list. And I think he cited that she got 46,000 votes in her last election. But I want to ask a bigger question, which is, like, we have traditionally seen governors and senators, like statewide officials, as being candidates for these highest offices. But if you think about how big cities have gotten now, like when Metro New York is 20 million people and LA's 15 and Atlanta's probably up to 5 or 6, like these cities are the same size as states. So like, is it time for us to view mayors as on the path to being presidential candidates? You know, like, do we need to revise our expectations at this point?
I think that has been the case for a while now. I mean, Giuliani was a pretty clear front runner for a long time in 2008, at least judging by the national polls. You know, and I think Bloomberg at various points could have made a serious run too. And I wouldn't say when you look at people like Julian Castro and others, I mean, I think the reason they didn't take off, the reason he didn't take off.
Julian?
What is it? Oh,
Julian.
Yeah.
Arriba! 2020.
Yeah, I think he, the fact that his candidacy didn't go anywhere, I don't think had anything to do with the fact that he's a mayor as opposed to a governor. I think he had an equal shot.
There was a hilarious take that what's his name? Who's Alex Castellanos, the Cuban Republican op, said the funniest thing I've ever heard about him. He's like, Julian Castro openly talks about how he has his twin brother show up to his campaign events and he goes to his twin brother's campaign events. Like, until no one can tell the difference between you and your brother, like, you're not going to be the president. No one on this podcast is entertained by that. Okay.
I want to have a twin. If I had a twin, I would do that all the time. Skip classes, take tests twice.
Would you rather have a twin or a mini-me?
What if you had a twin who was just a little bit better at you in everything? How much would that suck? Like worked out all the time, better job. I'd be so pissed. I might
Isn't that basically the beginning of like every movie?
Mm-hmm. Well, how about Fiserv? You want to get into that? If they're gonna
no, I don't.
I was just going to read another item from the mailbag.
Okay.
This one's from Anonymous on Val Demmings. He says, I can see it coming down to Kamala or Demmings, and she, meaning Demmings, absolutely clobbers Kamala in head-to-head. Kamala has a name ID advantage and maybe fundraising advantages, and that's about it. Kamala versus Demmings does not seem like a particularly tough decision if your goal is to beat Donald Trump and pick an effective VP.
Well,
who's the effective VP?
Demmings.
Okay. I mean,
Kamala's got the attorney general background, and I guarantee you there's going to be tons of cops she went easy on, a lot of brutality allegations that went nowhere, so they can torture with that.
I mean, but I understand why, like, I've been trying not to talk about this, but maybe it's time to sort of say this. I sort of feel like when I go outside my apartment and everything's boarded up, like almost everything's closed because it was gutted.
By the way, I couldn't order Uber Eats yesterday because of the protests.
Yeah, and there are like people,
the struggle is real,
out marching in the streets. Like, I'm not trying to say anything about why they're doing it. Like, there's a lot of injustice in the history of this country, and we see it every day. I feel like I'm like walking around Rome when like the Christians showed up. They're like or like the Anabaptists in Europe. Like, do I need to stop talking?
I feel like you're going somewhere good.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm walking around like Rome when the Christians showed up, like when they had like seen God for the first time and met his son, or like when the Anabaptists in the Reformation like started making communes in Germany and Switzerland. And like, it's like this whole different way of like perceiving the world and perceiving politics. The way when new religions show up and people get
I take back my prior statement.
Well, so do you, I mean, this is the question, right? Are the protests basically a news cycle item that will be gone in about 2 weeks? Or
no, I don't think so.
Are we really at the cusp of something?
I think
this has got Me Too level momentum.
I don't think so. Like, I think it's a different way. I mean, it's not like a new thing. People have always thought about the world in like a very race and identity forward thing. It's just that like for a while we had made the choice just not to think that way. And if that is the way you think, then like you can get past Kamala Harris having like a banged up record as a San Francisco DA because like she meets the right strictures by identity. Like you can kind of push that information to the side. I guess that's where I'm going.
I'm kind of on the fence about whether or not this is a serious paradigm shift, because if you even think about how far the debate has moved in the last couple of days, I mean, literally a couple of days ago, you had Tom
Is it even a debate, though? I mean, pretty much everyone agrees that...
Hold on, I want to hear this.
Sorry.
Well, I mean, even a couple of days ago, you had Tom Cotton writing in the New York Times calling for a full-fledged military crackdown, and the White House was seriously entertaining this as a possibility. I think we've already moved beyond the point where a crackdown on that scale is not happening. And I would also say that although there continues to be looting and rioting, I think the nonviolent demonstrators are gaining an edge. So, on the one hand, yeah, they are turning out crowds, but it's also, there is a clear pathway to get some kind of a political resolution resolved here, which would basically be criminal justice reform and some other things happening. So I think we will see policy changes coming out of it, but are we looking at a revolution? I don't know.
No, I think we get lip service, superficial policy changes, nothing substantial.
No, I mean, I agree with you. Like, no one's head is getting put on a pike. Like, no one's like, cities aren't going to burn. We've had a very chaotic moment. I think it's clear, even as someone who tends to be suspicious of like revolutions, like it's clear to me now that people demonstrating in the streets are very different from people robbing Gucci stores in Soho. Like, those are different crowds of people, and we should sort them that way. But I do think that like this way of thinking about the world is here to stay. Like this way of thinking about the world that sort of reminds me of like the old Calvinists in Europe, where it's like the body you're born into, like you're either going to heaven or you're going to hell, depending on, the predestined and the elect and the damned. And like that, I don't see that going anywhere. And I think that will have a big effect on politics going forward.
I would say that in terms of immediate predicted implications, I would point to a couple of things. I think that this has done a great deal of damage to Trump, and I think that it's really called into question his competence and his ability to unify the country. So I think that he will remain an underdog for a long time now.
Yeah, I think he's cooked.
I don't know that it affects
Biden.
Sorry?
So Biden, no one's cooked if the opponent is Biden. You always got a puncher's chance.
But here's the thing. Thing is Trump right now here's what he's saying. We're going to do it by metaphor. He's like, Pepsi sucks. Don't buy Pepsi. It sucks. Let me remind you of all the reasons why Pepsi sucks. Pepsi being Democrats and Joe Biden. And he has no ability to say this is why Coke's good. If he's Coke, he has no message about why people should vote for him as an alternative. He just has a very negative way of talking about people that aren't him.
What about Jolt Super Cola?
About what?
Jolt, twice the caffeine, twice the sugar.
Yeah, but you at the end of the day, you have to have a sales pitch. Like, your sales pitch can't be everyone else sucks. You have to tell another story.
I think that the only group in America that could save Donald Trump right now is Antifa. I mean, I think he needs chaos in this country to rise to maybe 2 notches above where it is to really emerge as a law and order.
What about the economy? That's rebounding. That could help.
But even when the economy was so-called good, I mean, I would say he was even an underdog at that time. Yeah, maybe you could really see a dramatic upsurge, but we're now at a point where Trump is out there touting an economy with a 13% unemployment rate. I don't know if that's where you want to be
after a national pandemic.
Trump is such an ironic person. Like, it's too dramatic to say he's like a Shakespearean person. But because of his personality, like, you understand why being a nice guy helps sometimes, is no one gives Trump credit for anything that he's done. I mean, he is hilariously, he is the president who passed a criminal justice reform bill that his Democratic opponent wrote, like the bad one that's evil now. Like, that's literally the situation. But Trump gets no credit for doing any of that stuff because he sucks and he's an asshole to people, and people read everything he does in the wrong way possible. So, I don't know. It's just, and then they impute things on him that he really, I would bet that Donald Trump has paid for abortions, but people think that he and Pence are religious right psychos. But there's no way you can tell me that Donald Trump isn't pro-life and paying for abortion.
Yeah, he's got at least
I don't know. People just impute shit onto him because he's a dick. So I don't know what I'm rambling about. I guess I'm just saying that no one cares because he has no credibility as a person, and that matters.
Also, we have a mailbag item. I was wondering how you all thought the GOP might react as Trump's re-election chances look more and more distant. I mean, to me, the first question is there any evidence that could persuade Trump's base that he is not a front runner to become president in light of the upset in 2016? I mean, I think that a critical segment of Republicans basically are going to believe right up until the end that Trump has a way to pull off an upset. But I'm curious if you guys agree.
I think he's a great campaigner. I think everyone's forgetting that. He's got skills that are similar to a stand-up comedian, the way he controls a crowd, the way he gets everyone energized and excited, and the way he attacks his opponents. I mean, he eviscerates people. He went through all the political dynasties in the Republican Party, chopped them up, spit them out. It was his first ever election, and then he did the same thing with the Clinton dynasty. So if you think he's not going to be able to find some weaknesses that he can exploit in Biden, I think you are underestimating his biggest talent, which is campaigning.
I just think that there will be a backlash against the Democratic Party because of this, but I don't think that you'll see it in this election. I think that people are just tired, and if the price is if the price of ending this is electing Joe Biden president, that's a pretty cheap price, in the game of politics. You can't find a Democrat who's closer to a Republican than Joe Biden. To just get your life back to normal, I'd pay that cost. I don't even have to think about it.
You don't think there's going to be political infighting after Biden gets elected?
I mean, there will be. And like I said, I think that the Democratic Party or the media or the technology business will have to pay the price for, they've looked terrible. Oh, you can't go outside, you're killing grandma. Oh, well, actually, you can go as long as you're marching in groups of thousands.
You can't go to church, but then here I am doing.
You can't go to your relative's funeral. Like, that looks terrible. And I think that, like, it's undermined the media, and it's undermined scientist credibility, and it's undermined, the way that
they just nixed that study that said hydroxychloroquine, whatever that is.
Yeah, it
was a totally fake study. They had to cancel it.
Like, if you want to draw a parallel to the present, I feel like police officers and DAs, like, lying and planning evidence and doing all that skeezy shit that's kind of brought us to this moment. Like, ideologically, I think that there will be a price to pay for, like, kind of liberal aligned people doing that over the course of the last year or two.
Don't forget the FBI being weaponized. That's a pretty big deal.
Yeah. Well, I think that Trump and Republicans are learning what, like, drug dealers and defense attorneys have learned for a long time, which is that law enforcement and the FBI cheats whenever they can.
Yeah, spying on a presidential candidate during an election, that's about as bad as it gets.
I mean, Zoltar, I think much more than Alex and I, you've been bullish on Trump's re-election chances. What are the indicators, if any, that would persuade you to sort of change your mind and short him in the markets?
I think I think his ace up his sleeve is campaigning. He's got a very good talent at eviscerating his opponents. So if the campaigning, maybe during the coronavirus, if those spiked up again and they start doing virtual events and he doesn't have the auditoriums full of people and he starts doing some pussy grab type flubs, then I'd be willing to bail. But like I said, I think I'm not buying him right now. I don't have any shares on this market at all, but I think he's got a puncher's chance because of his talent at campaigning. He's pulled off dramatic upsets in the Republican Party, and he's pulled off a dramatic upset against Clinton. So to think he can't do it again against Biden, at some point you got to say this guy's actually good at campaigning, and that's why he's winning. It's not just a fluke.
Well, Zoltar, there is one thing that everyone comes here for every week, and these would be markets that you are invested in and you are active in, and that are locks, right, bro?
The Zoltar locks of the week.
Bingo.
All right, we talked about this briefly. Flynn, he's got oral arguments against the 3-judge panel, 2 of which are Republican-leaning judges, appointed judges. I think Flynn's attorneys are going to destroy Sullivan's attorneys. I think that it will become quite apparent to those listening to the hearing which way the judges are going to go. So, number one, on June 12th, the morning of June 12th, when that hearing is, you will see a spike in Flynn shares. So buy it, hold them if you want, or you can sell them for a quick profit on that day.
Load up your bags, boys.
Okay, now here's one that no one's really been talking about, but it's a Zoltar. I would consider a cracked Zoltar market. It's trading at 46 cents right now, something like that. Will SCOTUS affirm the Mazars case? That's the one where the Congress is subpoenaing Trump for his financial records and his family's financial records. The argument that they made, the Congress made, was that anything tangentially related to passing a bill gives us the right to subpoena. The judges, the Supreme Court arguments made it pretty clear that they think there's got to be some type of balancing test. You can't just, subpoena the president every day for every document he has and turn it into a harassment thing. So they're going to make him impose a balancing test. Now, what everyone's screwing up on this market is they're thinking, because the market says, will he affirm any part of the lower court's decision? People, for some reason, think that the issue is, does Congress have the right to subpoena Trump? And can that subpoena involve financial records? No one's arguing that Congress has the right to subpoena people. Of course they do. What they're arguing is you can't subpoena his financial records without some type of balancing test. That's the only issue. Because that's the only issue, it's either going to be affirmed or remanded. There's not going to be, or are they actually, there's a third chance it might be a political question, but it's not going to be affirmed in part, remanded in part. It's just either going to happen or not happen. I looked at the law. I listened to the judge's questions. It's pretty clear that they're going to make him make Congress do some type of balancing test where they have to show that the burden imposed on the president doesn't dramatically outweigh the need for Congress to see its financials to help them pass a bill.
So as far as I can tell,
Long story short,
Trump's pretty fat, so the balance is going to tip his way on Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yes, on this one, it's going to get either they're going to declare it a political question and not answer it, or they're going to remand it and make the lower court apply a balancing test. Either way, none of it's going to be affirmed. So buy no shares. They're in the 40s right now. I'd buy them all the way up to 80 cents. That's how confident I am on that.
Boom, bacon.
Okay.
Bank that bacon.
Now, I'm probably going to do a blog post if I get off my ass in the near future about, I went through all 200, I think there's like 220 markets, something like that. I went through all of them, flagged the ones that are good bargain basement deals. There's a few, about 5 or 6, but the 3 I will list right now. Will Trump complete his term? That's what Pratik was talking about earlier. That's at 86 cents. So basically, will Trump fight impeachment and then 2 months before the end of his term quit? I think it's a pretty strong chance that's not going to happen. 86 cents. If I told you you could get a stock to pay 16% in 2 months.
So you're going to pay 86 cents for the chance that like an Antifa brigade isn't going to get across the Secret Service line and put his head on a pike.
Right. He won't get killed by Antifa.
Feels like a fair trade to me.
It's basically an assassination bet.
I would, just to be clear, I regard the highest risk in that market of Trump getting heart disease or something like that. But people like that usually get heart attacks after they're done with some major life event. So I think he'll make it through January.
They could be like
Bernie. I love that you've actually looked at medical literature about, well, if he's going to get a heart attack, it'll be after the election. All right, Zoltar, what else you got on that board?
Last 2, Giuliani. Everyone's forgetting about him, but there's a market on if he's going to be charged with anything.
Forget him.
And if Trump is going to pardon him. Charged, I think, is at 86 cents. Pardon is at 90. For him to get pardoned, he would have to get charged and convicted in the next 3 months. I don't see that happening. That's free money. I don't think he's going to get charged. That's free money. 86 cents, 90 cents. You're welcome.
Boom. Well, there you have it. Love ending these podcasts with a little bit of sweetener for the boys there. We have reached, this is the end. These podcasts are getting kind of long too. I feel like I should give a kiss to anyone who's still listening to them. So
just edit them out the boring parts.
You mean every time you talk?
Exactly.
More like every time I talk. PJ, you got anything else? Where can they find you?
Twitter, PJ, and then my last name.
Zoltar, you want to say goodbye?
Yes, truthbomber_. Hit me up on Twitter DM if you would like to join the Zoltar WhatsApp think tank where we shoot the shit about breaking articles and ways to make money off of political gambling.
Let's sell that subscription service for $1 million a month because there is more gold on Star Spangled Gamblers than there is in Fort Knox. That's a scientific fact. I'm King Dog. This is Star Spangled Gamblers. If you're still with us, we love you. We'll be back at the end of the week with, I think we got something lined up with Ladbrokes Politics. So the content marches on, boys. Good night.
Cowboy butts drive me nuts.